disagree with me about that, but no, people disagree with me about a lot. Now, these folks want to make sure that who you are is the one that enters the situation. And these folks tend to say, you pay attention to the situation. There was a guy named Joe Fletcher that I actually knew back in the 60s, and he said that love does what the situation requires. Not quite. Not quite. And so what I try to do is keep both of these in tension. Now, what I say, and let me be very clear, I often say I am not pro-abortion. And what I mean by that, please don't misunderstand, I'm not saying that a woman cannot make the decision to have an abortion. I think that's, first of all, not for me to say, and I think it's nuts. But I don't know about you, but I don't go around saying, oh boy, I'm for abortion. Do you? I don't know anybody who does. Well, there might be one or two, for crying out loud, but or something like this. Every time I've counseled a woman about abortion, it's a damned hard thing to do. And Dennis, you must have done all kinds of things like that. And I'm just saying, I doubt that you're pro-abortion. Yeah. Would you be the physician in charge if it were in your field to do one, if you thought it was required? Are you opposed to them altogether?
I chose not to go through that training.
Uh-huh.
But I get patients come to me. I can tell you it's a gut-wrenching thing for them to contemplate.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure they carry that hard decision with them for years afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
But I agree. I don't think the state has any part in getting itself in the middle there between the patient and the doctor.
Yeah. And so I come down hard on the nation state. Folks, I think it's very important that we keep the nation state within certain areas and not allow its entrance into other areas. I mean, that's a very important matter, not only in terms of Christian faith, but it's also an important matter in politics. Take a look at the great book, Politics as Vision. Now I can't think of his name. But it's one of the great books on politics in the last 25 years. Wolin, W-O-L-I-N. And just look at the way he works with the whole issue of the state and the citizenry. By the way, you better put your thinking cap on when you look at these so-called Christians advocating white nationalism. That ain't Christian. That's wicked. But anyhow, so thinking through the proper role of the state, and I think you would know I do not want an establishment of religion by the United States. Let me say why. I care about the state, but I care more about the church. I don't want the church in bed with the United States. Do you? I want the church to be a critical and, yes, many ways faithful entity within a nation state, any nation state. I taught in our seminary in Moscow for 3 weeks once upon a time. And this was 95, so the Soviet Union collapsed 89, wasn't it? And so this was 6 years later. I had in the group a captain who had been a man who had been he was now in ministry, had been in a United Methodist ministry. He'd been a captain in the Soviet army. And somehow Marx's name came up one day in class. And somebody said something about Marx, about we don't know about him. And I said, pardon me? They said, we don't know about Marx. And I said, well, would it be helpful just to sketch out a few things? Yeah. So I did a down and dirty 30 minutes on Karl Marx. And the captain who was sitting here in the USSR said to me, I have never heard that in all my years in the Soviet Union. They didn't know what Marx said. Why? Because they were Leninist, Stalinist communism. Now, there are good reasons to be critical of Marx, okay? Max Weber said where Marx is wrong, it's more important to know where Marx is wrong than where everybody else is right. That's overstated, but it ain't a bad quote, okay? You hear my point? Now, why would not students in a theological school have a critique of Marx? Why wouldn't they, first of all, know what the hell he said? Do you know how many people are critical of Marx? And I listen to them talk, and they don't have the foggiest notion what Karl Marx said. That's idiocy. See? I had a guy do a critique of me. I think it's on, I can't get my response. Does anybody know how you get a response to somebody who's just basically violated you? I need to get my answer to him on, if you go to, what do you call it? If you go to, where the online search.
Your search engine.
What? Google. If you go to Google and Google my name, down there's a guy named Gagnon. And he writes, quote, a critique of an article I wrote, 800-page article back 20 years ago. And his response was 5,000 pages, 5,000 words. And he misquoted me. He said I said things I didn't say. I ate his lunch, but I can't get my response on Google. How do you do that? Anybody know how to do that? So anyhow, what's interesting, he was at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary when he wrote the critique. I see that he resigned. Do you know what that means? He was invited. He was invited, yeah. And he's now in some fundamentalist seminary in the South, which is where, in God's economy, he really needs to be, I think. But where was I going with that? I was just saying, as Christian people, we want a critique of the state. The state is not Lord for us. Christ is Lord. Do we want to be critical of our understanding of the Christian faith? Sure, yeah. But to know those boundaries and stand there is just crucial. And I think I'm not a damn communist, for crying out loud. There are people who talk about a Christian communism, which is radically different from anything you've ever heard, probably. And you might look at that sometime. I am some kind of a Christian socialist, but that's another question for another time, okay? I try not to bootleg that in on you, or if I do, I'll tell you. But it's so important to keep the state appropriately bounded. The state is the easiest thing to turn into an idol, perhaps other than religion. Okay. Am I clear? I mean, please feel, you can always take me on, where you think I'm just dead wrong. And it's not because I don't love America. I do love America. I've told you my story of flying from Boston to LA and sticking my head in the window. And you can see 30 or 40 miles of land from the window of an airplane. The sky was cloudless that day. That's very unusual in this country. Usually somebody's got clouds. I sat with my head in the window from leaving Boston Airport all the way to LA. I just kept my head. I'd have to turn every now and then, otherwise your neck just spasms, But I stayed in that window so I could always see. I'd look away, I could look back, see where it's at. I saw a 30 to 40 mile swath of America from sea to shining sea in one afternoon. That's wonderful. It's wonderful. So I love it. And Peggy Sample loves me, but she knows to be critical of me. Right? She even knows where the real issues are. Okay. Anything else? What about, let's get back to abortion.
Where this whole matter of where life begins and whether you take a life or you don't, you're saying it should not be within any government, state.
Well, I thought that I thought Roe v. Wade was pretty good at that point. What it said, what it said was the state does have an interest in unborn children. And it set up policy. I'm not going to remember the exact language, but the policy was designed so that it would encourage as many abortions as take place to occur in the first trimester. It was trying to get that done. I think that's very important if you can do it. All right. The second trimester they would allow. There were a lot more constraints at the point of the third trimester, but there aren't very many abortions in that trimester anyhow. At least all the data that I've seen it would bear that out. Now, I do not mean to say that there is not value in the fetus. There certainly is. I'm just trying to say is that kind of value needs to be, looked at in terms. But what our discipline of the United Methodist Church says, by the way, we got a pretty good discipline. You ever read the Social Creed or the teachings there? It says about abortion that we are hesitant. Oh, how does that read? But then it says, basically, we want to value unborn life. And we need to recognize that there are tragic conflicts of life with life that may require an abortion, okay? I think that's pretty good language. And I think Roe v. Wade had a way of doing that, and it was working for us. Now, I have a good time with people who believe that life begins at conception and ends at birth. I'm talking about the people who will fight politically all they can to make sure that you have to have a baby, but then they won't do anything to help you with that baby after it's born. They're opposed to any kind of welfare. Could I tell you my tongue-in-cheek policy? Here's my tongue-in-cheek policy. You can ask me later what tongue-in-cheek means. That any child born of an unwed mother automatically goes on Social Security and receives $2,000 a month until that child reaches 18 years of age. And then we say to you folks that believe in conception, that life begins at conception, we want you to pass that legislation. And then they're going to say, well, no, we can't pay for it. If you will enter into the progressive taxation that characterized this country at the end of World War II, we've got more than enough money to do it. But they aren't about to do that because the reason why they don't, the reason why, let me say some. I've got dear friends who are opposed to abortion under almost any circumstance, okay? I respect them. I don't agree with them, but I respect them. Stan Hauerwas is one, for example. Stephen Long down at SMU is another. I haven't talked to him about it, but Troxler out in the Carolinas is another. They're very dear friends. They just take a different position I do, okay? But I'm talking about the people who basically use abortion as an issue to keep you so busy here, they don't notice how many tax breaks they're given to the extraordinary wealthy people. Are you aware of how many of the number of increases in billionaires that have occurred in the last 20 years? It is just wretched. And it's an outgrowth of tax breaks. And let me tell you, if you're a great friend of Bill Clinton, he participated in it. Bush, yes, he participated in it, bought into what his dad called voodoo economics, as did Clinton. Obama participated in it. In fact, oh dear God, let's not go to Trump. He gave a tax break to the rich that was enormous. It benefited him. And working people got basically a pair of shoes. Now, I've been nonpartisan, folks, okay? I'm not talking about Republicans. We're talking about Republicans and Democrats You know what a legislator in Missouri told one of our people they were assigned to go talk to him. I was talking to somebody. He said to him, you know, the people of Missouri think, and we've got that established. 2/3 of the people in Missouri want this. You know what he said? I don't care what the people want. Why? Because he's a pimp for the rich. You know. Now, in biblical terms, most of us are rich. But I'm not talking about people who got $2 or $3 or $4 or $5 million in their pension or stocks and bonds. I love her to death, but Taylor Swift is worth $1.1 billion. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I just heard in the State of the Union, the very wealthy tax is 8% on the very wealthy. So the tax that they're paying compared to your tax, percentage-wise, is much less. Figure that one out.
Yeah. The 55 major corporations in this country do not pay any taxes at all. At all. And they are all billion-dollar corporations. One of the ways you do that is offshore your office. You've got, what's the name of the island where you've got all these offices down there? It's basically just a room. Cayman. And so they make the great range of their profits. Some of them making them, by the way, McDonald's now it had in 95, had a big McDonald's store in Moscow. So the point is, we got a lot of people ain't paying their way. And they think you're unpatriotic if you expect them to. And a lot of them pay $10 an hour or less to their workers. You say a billionaire earned the money? Read the Bible where it talks about people who don't pay adequate living wages. I've got a packet if I can find it. It's that thick. It just has 1 or 2 lines of biblical passages on righteousness and justice. It goes on and on. One of my favorite things is when somebody says, sample, there are 5 passages on homosexuality. I say there are over 500 on justice. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into all that. And I obviously don't have any feelings about it, but shall we go to, and I'm not against rich folks. There's some wealthy people. They aren't worth $1 billion, but they're worth 50 million maybe or so, and it supports St. Paul. Not only that, I know one guy puts big money into building concrete houses in Guatemala with a single stove in them, and that's a terrific increase in the quality of life for those folks. And he puts a chunk of money in it. He gave $5 million to somebody the other day. But he actually works for a living. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I can't remember who all, is it Buffett that got the people together and they had to agree to give up 99% of their income, like the Gates and so forth. And you haven't heard about any of them going into poverty.
Buffett is one of my favorite people. Yeah. We've got most of our investments in him. What's he called? Berkshire, yeah. And yeah, I would encourage you as a person of faith to look at your investments and make sure that the people you're invested in are doing the stuff you want them to do. Yes, ma'am.
I've been sharing this quote with anybody who's willing to listen, so why not Sunday school class? And to me, it really speaks about the current times of Christian nationalism. It says that the masses see their religion as true, the elites see all religion as false, and the powerful see all religion as useful.
Yeah. Who said that?
It just says that it's an old saying.
Would you text that to me? I can look it up and find out who said it, I think.
But
Maybe.
I've been saying that, I've been reading that a lot.
Oh, there's no question. If you study wealth, and I'm not I'm not talking about y'all unless somebody in this room is worth $100 million, and I don't know of anybody here that is. I'm talking about huge, huge money. Poor Travis Kelce, I don't know how he can hang out with Taylor. He's only worth, what, 80 million? Or is it less? Is it half that? Maybe it's half that.
We're gonna pay high school athletes so that they can have, because they have so much maturity to decide how to speak.
Yeah. Well, I love Patrick. I do love Patrick, but I swear there's something wrong when we pay an athlete $500 million, and he's going to make more than that in advertisements, you know. And I know he's an attractive. I just really love him. He is the smartest guy when he's about to play another team. Watch him. Oh, we're up against a really good football team. We're going to have to bring our best game. Let me tell you how smart that is. The last thing you want is to say to a big league ball player, you know, one of the problems with being a big league ball player, I've learned this. I don't know that out of my own experience, okay? One of the things about a big league ball player is you play 162 games a year. Maybe you don't play that many. Let's say you play 150. Only 150 games. Then you get in the off season, you play another 5, and then you play, you know, the division, then the league, and then the World Series. And you're in the World Series, and you've played something like almost 170 games in a little over 6 months, and that doesn't count spring training. And so you're sitting there. First of all, you got aches and pains everywhere. Somebody said Yogi Berra, they looked at him after he'd finished the World Series, and he had bruises. You know, when you catch, I can't get out there anymore. When you catch, you know, what you've got to do when the ball is in the dirt is you make a bowl with your glove, your hand, your knees, so that if it skips in the dirt, you try to pick it. But a lot of those balls you can't pick. You just got to block them, keep it in front of it, pick it up, and you can throw it a second. Okay. He had bruises all over the inside of his thighs and his calves. So you're probably a little hurt playing ball in the World Series. So you've been playing ball for over 6 months. Count spring training. You've been playing ball 7 months. And you come to ballpark. It's exciting. But how am I going to get up for this game? And then a ball player on the other team says, you know, that team ought not even be in the World Series. They didn't win some really key games. Say what? You'd be, even I playing at an amateur level. When I hear some guy say something like, suddenly that pain diminishes. I just want a chance. I want him to come home on me when I'm catching, because I'm going to put that ball in him and my shoulder into him, and I'm going to put him in that screen that's 25 feet behind me, okay? Because I am motivated to play that guy. Oh, that's unchristian, I understand, but nevertheless, you see what I'm saying? What does Patrick Mahomes say? What a great quarterback. One of the best quarterbacks in the league. That's so smart. And then he's just motivated to go out there and beat you. So don't misunderstand as not liking some people. I just question. We are now charging so much to go to football games that the people for whom a sales tax is a far more progressive tax than it is for people like me. I don't really notice a 10-cent tax on my groceries or my food or anything. Do you? Maybe some do. I don't mean for you to respond, but I'm saying most of us, I doubt that we notice it. But we are subsidizing that kind of wealth. I'm not saying don't vote for the stadium. I'm raising a bigger question. What is the context in our society today? When I was a student at Boston, the secretary to the dean, Dorothy Lord, when you looked at her, she was this severe looking woman when you'd walk in. And if you spoke to her and you were nice to her, she'd just smile. She had good teeth, but her smile just was not good. You know, she just looked kind of like an animal. She looked like a woman who had animal-like teeth. Something, you know what I mean? And I walked in there one day, and it was in April, and the Red Sox were playing. Red Sox Stadium is a half a mile from Boston University School of Theology. And we got into a conversation. She said, "You know, Tex, have you been to Fenway? That's Red Sox Stadium. Have you been to Fenway this year?" "No." "Why not?" "Well, I've been busy." "Well, I want you to know," and she said this with her severe voice, "I want you to know that if you get a theological education and you do not play hooky to go see the Red Sox, you've basically failed your work here." I saw Bobby Shantz, that great left-hander, won 24 games back during the 60s, you know. I saw him play, only I sat in the outfield bleachers, $2.50. I sat in the outfield bleachers here. He was in the bullpen. I was sitting here. He's in the bullpen there, and he's warming up. And I get to talk to him and an outfielder. I will never forget it. Dorothy Lord knew her theological education. So I love baseball. The question is, when you could pay $2.50 and go to a game, and we're subsidizing, what I want to do is I want the city of Kansas City to buy both the Chiefs and the Royals. Green Bay owns the Green Bay Packers. Did you know that? Now, I don't want the government to own them. I want us to have the public outfit own them, and we elect the board. That's what I want, but that's another time. Okay. Anything else about, is that clear? I'm trying to say that I don't think Roe v. Wade was perfect, but I thought it was the kind of policy that government can make. And abortions were declining. At least Guttmacher reported that back toward the end of Roe v. Wade. I think the Supreme Court well, it's at 14. You know, any person born or naturalized in the United States is a citizen. Okay? Where does it get any clear mandate to declare that life begins at conception? And the Alabama Supreme Court, not only conception outside of conception itself is a fairly complicated process, according to the biologists that I read. Did I respond to what you were asking? Okay. Now we do. I want to tell you something about Nietzsche, okay? I remember I had a heck of a time spelling his name when I first started, and sometimes I do it wrong. Remember in the German, when you got a double vowel, you pronounce the second one. Like the theologian Niebuhr, you pronounce it not Niebuhr, you pronounce it Niebuhr. And so Nietzsche, not Nietzsche. Got it? So that second vowel in the German is the big deal. What do you say about him? Born in 1844, died at 55 years of age in the year what did I say? 1854 and died in 1900. Brilliant, just brilliant. Born in a small town in Prussia, began to have serious illnesses, even in his 40s. Some people think he suffered syphilis. He was a visitor to brothels on occasion. But that's also been heavily contested by some major Nietzsche scholars. But nevertheless, had the headaches, migraine headaches, suffered from illnesses the last 3 decades of his life, and then went into serious dementia the last 10 years or so. So, I mean, he lived a really, really tough life physically. But he's a little more complex than an atheist only, so let's remember that about him, and I'll try to pick up on that. And once again, the reason we're working on atheism is not to make you atheist. It's to do some critique. If you can critique these 3 guys, you've got a pretty good critique, okay? First of all, for Nietzsche, the will to power is the clarion call of his thought. He wants to see people empowered, all right? He wants to see people get out, we'll talk about it later, but the whole herd mentality, those kinds of things. My mother worked in a factory for 20 years, making the minimum wage. When she started, it was, 40 cents an hour. She worked there 20 years and never made more than the minimum wage. And she worked in quality control, okay? I said to her one day, Mama, why don't you organize that shop? I'll help you. I'll get the people in here to do it. And you know what my mama said? Son, I'm just friends with all those people. I don't want to make enemies of anybody. That's what he would call the herd mentality. All right. Where is that? That's here somewhere. Slave morality and herd mentality. It's here. We'll get to it. If I don't, I'll write it in. I tried to abbreviate the notes I sent you. But that will to power that he would say is the basic energy force of all of human life. Now, you may want to question that. I do. But first hear him, okay? That will to power. And he would say, where we screw up is when we lose that and start willing other things into our lives, okay? The will to power leads him to what Schrag calls a reactive atheism. What he means by reactive atheism is Nietzsche is arguing against the kind of belief in God that he saw in the world in which he lived. He saw people in the church committed to a slave mentality that kept them repressed and kept them oppressed, okay? He saw people committed to a herd mentality in which they would agree with that, and it disabled them in terms of taking anything on that was radically, oppressing their lives. Hear it? So he's reacting to what he saw an awful lot of Christians look like. Look here. He said that what he saw was a lot of these people had an enfeebled deity. I grew up in Brookhaven, Mississippi. And I've told you the story about the man who was shot and killed in 1955. I was 20 years old. I heard the shots. I did not see it. I was 2 blocks away. He had attempted legally to bring 6 absentee ballots to the county courthouse. 3 men met him. He was shot down in cold blood. They put 6 bullets in him. There were 100 people around there, okay? We actually had a prosecuting attorney who said, I'm going to prosecute those men and I need witnesses. He could not get a single witness to a premeditated murder that occurred on the front lawn of the institution of democratic government in my community. You know what Nietzsche would have said had he been alive? There it is. There's that herd mentality. There's that slave mentality. Why can you not stand up? And a lot of people would say, well, you know, I'm in my church and I got to get along in this community and I don't want to create any enemies. And besides, I don't want somebody to shoot me. My daddy said to me, I said to Daddy, Daddy, that's wrong. There's no way you can make that right. By then I was a sophomore. I'd finished my sophomore year at Millsaps. And he said, I know that. And he said, but if you say anything, you'll have to leave this town. And if we support you, we'll have to leave this town too. And do you know what? I didn't say anything. If I could live my life over again, I would wish to God that I had said so. I went to church that Sunday. You know what the pastor preached on? The beauties of nature. And an atrocity of history had happened on the streets of my hometown. And I sat there and kept my mouth shut. You say, well, you were young. I was 20 years old, and I knew it was wrong, and I didn't do anything. I made up my mind that would never happen to me again. I hope it hasn't. But reactive atheism, he's reacting to a God who is so enfeebled that that God can't even call you to stand up on an issue like that. That violates everything you think you believe in terms of democracy and Christianity and just sheer humanity. Hear what he's doing? He says that in the Christian faith, there is no power to affirm life. And you know, we can always say, oh, love life. Life's so good. What about when it counts? Do we affirm life? And then what he's calling for is a master morality. That's a morality in which you are empowered to take your stand. To be, we'll talk more about that later, to be the person you truly are, which is to be a master. Now, there's a question here. This is a question that Schrag, he's the guy who wrote the book that we're working with here. Really, I read about 8 pages an hour of it. So you decide whether you want to read it. But it's an awful good book. He says this question, he says, where does Nietzsche in his master morality make the case for justice? Where are the norms of justice? In other words, he's saying, you can be the master of your own morality, but where would he call you to take a stand against the people of your hometown?
We could go out to that zip code south of the river and ask them.
Yeah.
And I
So-
don't know if I would stand up.
Yeah.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever broken the law in an active kind of a way. I mean, where you intentionally broke it because of something you believed in. Let me tell you, that is, I don't know about you, but I am so raised in being shaped by the law. Oh yeah, I'll drive 5-10 miles an hour over a speed limit. But when I get in an institution of government and our idea is we're going to disrupt this place, boy, that's hard to do. That's hard to do. You know, because you're so trained to behave. You may not believe this. When I was growing up, you know what they call me? That good little boy takes sample. I was that good boy. You know what that meant? Hell, I didn't want to mess up and get in a bad way with some people. Do you understand? In other words, it was not the moral integrity of a stand. All right? It was, I don't want to mess in my nest. Hear the difference? Anybody else grow up that way? So where would the norms of justice be in Nietzsche? And then if we don't have any by which to call him into question, do we suffer the same problem? In other words, if the church is going to criticize this kind of atheism, where is the integrity from which we operate to do so? I'm trying to say that one of the chief arguments against atheism is when people of faith take stands that cost them. We're clear? I'm not talking about going out there and just breaking the law for the sake of breaking the law. That's stupid. For one thing, you want the force of law. Yeah, you want to support the force of law, but not always. Not every time. I suspect most of us love it that those folks crawled on that ship in Boston Harbor. You know, dumped the tea in the water. What do we have that matters enough to us to do that? You know, that kind of question. So that's a big question for him. He does not address that. But he does talk about a transvalued morality. It is a morality that sees itself advancing its power. It's an expressive morality in that sense of expressing one's power. It's liberation from good, bad conscience. Good conscience. You ever want to do something that you knew wasn't wrong, but you also knew you'd take heat for it? Wasn't wrong, but you'd take heat for it. And your conscience was part of your problem because you had a bad conscience that tended to favor not coming into disfavor. Am I communicating? The man who taught me to play baseball, I guess he needs to remain nameless. He had played Class C, Cotton States League ball. And he wound up in Brookhaven working in the oil field. And he was the dad for the DeMolay, and I was a member of DeMolay for, 6 years, 7 years. And he organized the DeMolay team. And I could throw the ball harder than anybody, so I became a pitcher. He basically taught me to play baseball. I don't think I ever called him into question for years. And then I got involved in the civil rights movement. And of course it went all over Brookhaven. Back then people knew me. They don't know me from a goat now. But I remember I went to see him in the oil field because I loved him. He taught me to play baseball. And we sat down under a tree out there in the field for lunch. And I had gone at lunchtime because I thought they'd have time to talk. And he, these things, they got a long handle like this. And on the end, they got a blade that goes like this. You know what I'm talking about? The straight blade that you hack weeds with. He had one of those things in his hand. And I sat down to talk with him thinking it'd be really a good time. And by now I was already in Boston and working for the Council of Churches. And so help me God, he put this blade right here, that far from my nose. And he said, Tex, you're just going to keep on and keep on. And we're going to have to stop you. And I didn't say anything. I should have taken him on. I should have taken him on. Now that was maybe herd mentality. I don't know. You tell me. But I had been so much a part of his team that I couldn't say to him, Mr. So-and-so, you are wrong. The South is wrong. The North is wrong. Something terrible, terrible has been going on in this country for 400 years. And you need to change. And I don't know how you can talk demolay out of one side of your mouth and then talk about this out of the other. Why didn't I stand up to him? Nietzsche would say, that's what I'm talking about, Sample. This herd mentality is a lot more subtle than you think it is. You were on a ball team. He was your coach. That herd mentality is big stuff, Sample. Get it in your head. Huh? Does that make any sense? What if you saw a church that did that continually? What would you say about them? What if you were Nietzsche? You got a migraine headache anyhow, and you see the churches around you and they're not calling anything into question. See what I'm... So he wants liberation from that. Okay? He wants liberation from the dictates of the herd. Now here's an issue for him. His talk of freedom is freedom from slave morality, herd mentality. Okay? We'll come to this in just a minute. Another criticism of Nietzsche. Where is freedom for? Where is the freedom to in his work? You know, when you're a teenager, you basically want freedom from. And you're a parent or a grandparent, and you say, now look, you're making choices right now, and if you aren't careful, they will completely blot out choices you want to make in 10 years. How do you communicate that to a 14-year-old? Freedom from, that's important. Liberation. Well, what about freedom for? Freedom for what? To do what? To be what? Over here now. He also talks about the eternal return. When he talks about the eternal return, he's saying that there are these moments. You could call them kairos or kairoi. That's the plural. Kairoi means you ever have something happen to you at just the right time that it changed your life? I'm talking in this case about something good. You ever have that thing? Yeah, I was so miserable. My second semester at LSU, I'd hurt my arm hitting fungos to the outfield. How do you hurt your arm hitting fungos to the outfield? And I had to drop out off the baseball team at LSU. I was taking trigonometry. I hated trigonometry. No offense to the nurses, other medical personnel in the room. I was taking a course on health. God, that textbook was so obvious, I just about died reading it. All right. I was taking a course on creative writing with a guy from New York City who's a Jew. And I've always kind of had this thing with the Jews. They took care of me in Brookhaven when I was growing up in a way, But I loved him. Going to his class and I'd say, what do we write? You know what he'd say? Anything you want to. He said, have you ever written about race relations in Mississippi? No. Can I do that? He said, what do you mean, can you do it? Do it. That's the only thing I had going on. Baseball was, classes were, and I was sitting there once a week writing a 3-page paper for him. That's the only thing going on. I lost 50, I'd gotten up to 180 pounds, which was big for me then. I lost 15 pounds just trying to pass trigonometry. I am walking down a sidewalk on the LSU campus. They've got these huge oak trees, the kind that their limbs bend over and almost touch the ground. There are rooms underneath them. You can go in there and play and do all that. I mean, it's just wonderful. I'm walking down there. It's nighttime. It's like 9 o'clock. And I'm headed to my dorm room, which is in the stadium. I actually lived in the stadium. You can still see it. That's where they play football. Okay. I was walking down this thing, and I am miserable beyond belief. And suddenly, I have this mystical experience. I've never had one since or one before quite like it. I just felt that I was in the very midst of the utter, inexhaustible expanse of God. And I walked. It felt like forever, but it was probably 5 minutes. Okay, probably 5 minutes. I knew in that moment that I had to go in the ministry, that I had to go to Millsaps College, and that things were going to be all right. All right? That moment. All right. Now, Nietzsche's not talking about that kind of moment theologically, but he is talking about that kind of moment when we get a kind of a proactive power where we are called to creativity. Oh, geez. It is beyond good and evil. That would take some unpacking, but that's what he says. And what he's for, I found that as a way into ministry, okay? Nietzsche says, no, these moments, this eternal return, calls us to an aesthetic life. So his solution is not, ministry, faithful life, etc., that you might want to talk about. His is, how do we learn to live a beautiful life? Hear it? So his aim is not ethics. His aim is not faith. His aim is the beautiful life. Just quickly. I know of a person, you go to their house, everything is right. It is in exquisite taste. Right? They are people of means, not super wealthy, but people of means. Their taste is extraordinary. They enjoy the arts. Right? Music. Oh my. They take advantage of the symphony and other forms, even jazz, sometimes country. If you have conversation with them, they are extraordinary conversationalists. They live an aesthetic life. They are the beautiful people. They are powerful people. That's Nietzsche's vision. Not into a herd mentality. Okay? Next week we'll do Freud, and then after that we'll do Sartre, and then after that we'll come back and do a critique. Okay? All right? Y'all are too quiet. Is that because I'm talking you to death and you don't get a word in edgewise? Or?
We're just trying to absorb all what you're telling us.
Huh?
We're just trying to absorb all you're telling us.
Okay. All that stuff's in your outline, by the way. I know it's a dense outline. Just read it slow and take Tums with it.
Oh, it'd be a good first book to read.